Welcome to this explainer. Look, renting in Ireland used to be a standard stepping stone, right? But now, it's practically a luxury. Let's get straight into the numbers.
Now, spending 30% of your income on rent, that's generally considered manageable. But for a massive chunk of Irish workers today, we're talking 50%. Half of your hard-earned wages swallowed whole before you've even bought a carton of milk or put the heating on. When you're handing over half your take-home pay just to keep a roof over your head, saving, well, that becomes near impossible. It's a serious financial trap.
Section 1. Where are the houses? The supply and demand problem.
So we're facing this fierce pressure from two sides. On the one hand, you've got surging demand driven by population growth and folks moving into urban hubs like Dublin, Cork, and Galway. But on the other hand, the supply is seriously lagging. We're bogged down by planning delays, and let's face it, the actual cost of putting bricks and mortar into the ground has absolutely skyrocketed. We simply haven't built enough to keep up. And when demand outpaces supply this fiercely, rent only goes one way.
And it's not just about how many houses we have, it's about who actually owns them. We're seeing a massive shift across the state right now. Smaller, traditional landlords are packing up and exiting the market, mostly citing regulation, costs, and poor returns. And who's replacing them? Institutional investors operating at an entirely different, massive scale. That fundamental shift changes the whole game, and it directly hits the pricing dynamics working families face every single month. But look, Ireland doesn't exist in a bubble. Broader global pressures feed right into our local economy. We're talking surging energy costs, increasing transport costs, and major global supply route disruptions, like the stuff we see happening around the Strait of Hormuz. All of that adds to the overall cost of doing business. And make no mistake, those big global pressures, they eventually trickle right down to the monthly rents you're paying down in Cork or Galway.
Section 2. Renters versus homeowners. A widening gap.
There is a really stark contrast in our society today. On one side of the divide, you've got homeowners. They're safely paying down a mortgage, building equity, and locking in that long-term security. But on the other side, you have renters facing these compounding costs, handing over rent month after month with this constant nagging uncertainty about lease renewals or sudden rent hikes. And every single year this goes on, the inequality gap between those who own property and those stuck renting, it just widens that bit further.
And this brings us to a massively frustrating reality for a lot of folks. Perfectly captured in our sources, rising prices don't always come with rising standards. You're paying a fair whack of your wages, yeah? But what are you actually getting for it? I mean, in some slick new developments, sure, the standard is brilliant. But for a lot of working people, they're stuck dealing with older properties, limited upgrades, and leases that offer absolutely zero long-term security. You're paying a premium, for sure, but you certainly aren't living in luxury.
Section 3. The toll on families. Life on pause.
You see, this isn't just a financial squeeze. The psychological toll is huge, and it's actively shaping our society. At year one, people are sharing accommodation way longer than they ever planned. Fast forward 5 years, and you've got adults, well established in their careers, delaying moving out of the family home. 10 years down the line, people are putting off starting families and settling down altogether. Major life milestones are literally being pushed down the road, all because of ongoing housing stress. It's basically putting Irish lives on pause.
We can understand this a bit better if we pull back and look at macro principles. When access to basic, essential resources tightens up, that access becomes brutally selective. Our sources actually point out that this is a dynamic seen across totally different economic systems throughout history. Take German colonial land constraints, for instance. Access to land or housing heavily depended on a person's economic position as costs and control tightened. Totally different system, obviously, but the exact same core principle is at play right here. When a basic resource is constrained, wealth dictates who gets it.
So pivoting directly back from those global analogies, the question we really have to ask ourselves is, how does this actually change the reality of the Irish housing system? What does this mean for the immediate, on-the-ground future for working families here at home?
Section 4. Where do we go now? Adaptation and policy.
Now, governments aren't entirely passive here. Step 1. The state steps in with measures like rent controls and various incentives. Step 2. They set ambitious targets to get more houses built. But step 3, well, that's the painful reality for the working family. It's waiting for the gradual effects amid some major trade-offs. These policies take a lot of time to build momentum. The effect is painstakingly gradual.
So right now, people are just trying to get by, but adaptation doesn't remove the pressure, it just manages it. People are adapting by commuting massive distances, sharing rooms well into their 30s, or just completely lowering their expectations. But managing this crushing pressure day to day, That isn't the same thing as fixing a broken system. The pressure is still there, quietly but fundamentally altering how we live. And that brings us right to the core takeaway of today's explainer. Renting feels like a luxury, not because it offers luxury, but because access to it is becoming constrained. Renting is no longer just a transitional stage, a quick stopgap before buying a house. It's morphed into this tightly constrained, permanent reality that is heavily, heavily dependent on what you earn.
So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If current trends continue, and renting becomes a permanent, highly expensive state for a massive portion of the Irish public, what kind of society are we actually building for the next generation? Will it be one of equal opportunity, or one fundamentally divided by property? Let that question sit with you. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.